Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me wherever and whenever you may be watching today. A huge thank you to the team at Haunted Shores for letting me share my research with you. So my name is Claire Slack. I am just in the very final weeks of my MA in folklore studies at the University of Hertfordshire, so I suppose I can officially now call myself a folklorist. Today I'll be talking to you about Foulness Island and the way in which this isolated coastal community has inspired Scarelore about everything from headless ladies lingering by ponds to nuclear conspiracy. Did the troubled history of Foulness's past create its eerie reputation and supposedly haunted landscape? Or was the eerie reputation created as Scarelore by those who didn't want people to visit in the first place? So, just a little bit of background for those of you who aren't familiar with the depths of the Essex countryside. Foulness Island is a site of special scientific interest, which includes about 6,000 acres of marshland. And as you can see from the image here, it's situated between three rivers, the Crouch, the Roach, and the Thames Estuary. Now, Foulness is a coastal community, and it's reachable from the mainland by just a single road and a deadly tidal path known to those locally as the Doomway. It's an island that's saturated by these ideas of the Eerie and has tales of ghosts, smugglers, conspiracy, and is often said to have this kind of extreme feeling of the outside, which haunts the island. And I'll be exploring this eeriness and the Scarelore that surrounds it throughout this short presentation. Now, the Essex coast more widely is packed full of spooky stories, including drowning pools, sea witches, and cursed wells, and I've been fascinated by this folklore since I moved to Southend 6 years ago. However, the first time that I heard about Foulness was only a year or so ago when I was reading Robert Macfarlane's book, The Old Ways. In his book, nature writer Macfarlane describes his journey as he walks from the Wakering Stairs to Foulness Island across the tidal causeway, which is known as the Doomway. Crosses on what was once the only way on and off the island before 1914. And as he does, he's greeted by signs which say things like, warning, the Doomway is unmarked and very hazardous for pedestrians. Another says, warning, do not approach or touch any object as it may explode or kill you. This is due to the large amount of military ordnance that remains along the Essex coast, kind of ghosts of the wars of the previous century. It's my opinion that the Doomway is at the heart of the area of Foulness Island. Not only is the Doomway surrounded by military debris, thanks to the century of military testing that happened on the island, but the land itself is also a deadly path to walk, with over 100 people having lost their lives while walking it. A particular passage of Macfarlane's book always sticks with me, where he speaks to his friend about the worry for the safety of his shoes as he crosses. And his friend simply answers, if we don't make it back in time, the tide will float off with your body. Now, when I spoke to one of the volunteers at the Foulness Heritage Centre, they confirmed the very real dangers of the Doomway. She said the tide will run faster than you can, and if it doesn't get you, the sink mud might. Now, for the lovers of Gothic horror amongst you, which I imagine will be fair few, this description of the Doomway will echo the setting of Susan Hill's 1983 novel, The Woman in Black. Whilst the location of Eel Marsh House is never kind of revealed definitively, tidal islands such as Foulness provided inspiration, with the land representing ideas of liminality as a place where the land becomes water, and as nothing is ever as safe as it seems. Now, in The Woman in Black, the tidal causeway is used to enhance the sense of isolation and entrapment felt when visiting Eel Marsh House, which is where the Woman in Black resides, although the causeway itself is also home to many ghosts. Similarly, Great Expectations, while not in itself a Gothic novel, uses the marshland, and in this case specifically these Essex marshlands, to show Gothic themes of being haunted and of desolation. I really love this quote from chapter 3. The mist was heavier yet when I got out upon the marshes, so that instead of my running at everything, everything seemed to run at me. As well as the Doomway and other similar tidal causeways providing inspiration for ideas of the Gothic in literature, ideas that without a doubt will influence the way in which a landscape is associated amongst those visiting, the Doomway is also a major barrier to access, which has made Foulness an almost impossible place to visit in the past and an almost inescapable place to live for those who try to make their lives there. The only road that now runs to the island, other than the Doomway, was only built in 1922 and the locals seldom used it then. And I feel that this kind of detachment from the mainland just adds to the sense of otherness and isolation, amplifying the feelings even further. During the course of my research into Foulness Island, I attempted to find evidence for the sense of eeriness that those not from the island often mention, beyond the fear inspired by the Gothic landscapes of literature. So I looked at TripAdvisor reviews and newspaper articles, and the words like desolate, lonely, isolated, dangerous, inaccessible, and ghostly quiet just kept popping up. Some reviews compared the island to Area 51, as the island was covered by the Official Secrets Act due to its atomic weapons testing that went on from the 40s to the 90s. Photography and video recording is still banned, which is why I have few images included in this presentation. And other kind of reviews just describe feelings of being watched or an unease on the island. Searches for reports of the encounters with the supernatural that could explain these feelings came up with remarkably little. There are several ghosts that are said to haunt Foulness Island, including the headless woman of Lucky Corner, a servant girl who took her own life in the pond and follows unsuspecting visitors home, and there's a ghost ship that appears from time to time. But I could find no kind of written recorded sightings of any of them, excepting of pages of a few kind of local haunted Essex type books, and all of these were written by people with no link to the island. No one from the island that I was able to speak to could remember anyone ever seeing the ghosts, although a volunteer from the Heritage Centre did suggest the headless girl was made up by smugglers to scare off passers-by. Now, this idea of Scarelore, like the creation of ghosts to keep people away through fright, is not an uncommon theme along the Thames Estuary, with several ghosts proved to be bait that conveniently appeared at times when the smugglers were unloading and would disappear once smugglers were assured their cargo was safely moved on. The most local of these I could find evidence of was at Hadley Castle, which is pictured here, which is a little further along London, but still on the Thames. Here, a white lady and a black man often appeared just before a shipment of illicit liquor would arrive on the coast, and duly disappeared when all the liquor had been moved away. The seclusion of Foulness Island and the estuary location made a perfect spot for those who wished to live away from society and the law, and throughout the 18th and right up to the 20th centuries, Foulness Island was described as causing unhealthiness in men due to the cramped living conditions and lack of morality. I think that was an 1861 description. In the 18th century, the river channels around Foulness were regularly used for smuggling due to the isolated location and the distance from both other communities and the law. This also meant that, according to local historian Philip Benton, in 1867, a considerable portion of the population were on the run from the law, and many residents struggled to trace their ancestors as outlaws changed their identity to evade capture. This feeling of otherness, kind of danger, has stayed with Foulness Island, as have some of the ghosts and ghost stories left behind by the nefarious residents of the past. So even up to the 1990s, Foulness retained its unhealthy reputation, with conspiracies leaked from the MOD weapons testing facilities about dead scientists. The most prominent story being in 2008, when a scientist called Terry Jupp was engulfed in flames during a mysterious bomb-making experiment, as well as radiation poisoning scares in the 1950s and secret government experiments. Whether these were based in an element of truth, as is definitely the case with Terry Jupp, or whether this was just more Scarelore created by the MOD to keep visitors away, is the subject of debate amongst islanders and mainlanders alike. And people who worked on the ranges, even as recently as 2005, reported a feel of dread and unease in certain areas of the island. These days, Foulness Island is far less smugglers and conspiracy, and more just a small island community that's struggling to retain its sense of identity, whilst ruled over by the strict regulations of the MOD. When speaking to islanders at the Heritage Centre, I got this kind of sense of sadness about a once tight-knit community that's now on its knees as children leave for the mainland as soon as they're old enough. There's also an increase of migration from the mainland for people who can afford it, and work kind of all but gone since the closure of the atomic weapons testing facility back in 1997. Even the local pub, seen here with this wonderful sign that says no tanks, has closed after access was further restricted a few years ago. Visitors can now only access the island once a month during the summer season, a grand total of 4 hours on a Sunday, and any other access is only granted by special permission and guarded closely by military police. In my opinion, this restricted opening only fuels the eeriness of the area. Who knows what lurks off the only road you're allowed to travel on? And I kind of completely agree with Mark Fisher when he describes Eerie as readily available in places devoid of humans. He said that in his book, The Weird and Eerie. This void, who knows what's off the road, leaves our imagination to run free about what happens there. So has the troubled history of Foulness's past created its eerie reputation? Or was its eerie reputation created as Scarelore by those who didn't want people to visit in the first place? Or even inspired by the echoes of the landscapes of Gothic literary texts? Maybe the very name foulness being a state of obscenity, vulgarity, inhumanity, or even filth, created its own Gothic history despite the reality of its Old English name, meaning bird headland, being quite disappointingly normal. I'll leave that to you to decide. Thank you for listening.